25 years before Dracula terrorized the world. She already existed, an aristocrat of fatal beauty, a seductress who changed names like someone changes masks. Carmilla, Milarca, Mircalla. Always the same creature, always the same hunger. But unlike the Count of Transylvania, Carmilla didn't hunt men. Her desire was exclusive. Young women. Her method was intimate, almost romantic. And her legacy? To forever define the archetype of the female vampire in literature. The question no one asks is, where did this disturbing creation come from? Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, a bored Irish lawyer who became a master of Gothic terror, published Carmilla in 1872. But the Countess of Karnstein wasn't born solely from his imagination. She was born from blood, from real Bacchum blood. Today, we're going to unearth the truth behind the fiction and discover who was the real-life woman who inspired the first great female vampire in literature. A woman whose crimes were so monstrous that even emperors had to intervene. Before we track down the inspiration, we need to understand what makes Carmilla so special. In 1872, the concept of vampire was still fluid. There was folklore, isolated legends, cheap terror tales. But no great literary work had consolidated the figure of the aristocratic undead as a sexual and supernatural predator. Le Fanu changed that. Carmilla isn't just a vampire. She's a countess, a figure of power, charm, and refinement. She doesn't attack brutally. She seduces. She doesn't invade. She's invited. And more importantly, she's not a dominating male monster. She's a woman who desires women. The novella's protagonist, Laura, describes Carmilla as someone who makes her feel both love and dread. The relationship between them is ambiguous, loaded with erotic tension disguised as intense friendship. Carmilla whispers, "You and I are one." And then she drains her blood, slowly, night after night. This focus on intimacy, on feminine seduction, and on blood as a symbol of desire was something revolutionary for the time. But where did Le Fanu get such a specific idea? The answer lies more than 1,000 kilometers away from Ireland, in an abandoned castle in Hungary. If Carmilla is fiction, Elizabeth Bathory is history. Born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families in the Kingdom of Hungary, Elizabeth grew up surrounded by privilege, political intrigue, and dark secrets. She married at age 15 to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, a brutal warrior known as the Black Knight of Hungary. While he departed for endless wars against the Ottoman Turks, Elizabeth administered the family's vast domains alone. Powerful. And it was in this aristocratic solitude that something awakened in her. The rumors started slowly. Missing servants, young peasant girls who entered the castle and never came out. But Elizabeth was a countess. Who would dare question her? It was only after her husband's death in 1604 that the horrors became impossible to ignore. Reports of systematic torture began to leak. Young women, some brought under false promises of work, others simply kidnapped, were kept prisoner. Elizabeth, along with loyal accomplices, subjected them to unimaginable tortures, burns, mutilations, beatings, and the blood. Always the blood. The most famous legend claims that Elizabeth believed that bathing in the blood of virgins would preserve her youth and beauty. She allegedly murdered hundreds of young women. Estimates range from 80 to 650 victims, just to collect this elixir of immortality. When she was finally investigated in 1610, Authorities found bodies buried on the castle grounds. Witnesses reported scenes of carnage. Her accomplices were publicly executed. But Elizabeth, being noble, she couldn't be tried as a commoner. She was walled up alive in her own castle, locked in a windowless room with only a small opening to pass food through. There, in total darkness, she lived for 4 more years, until she died in 1614. The Blood Countess became legend, and that legend traveled across Europe. Now observe the similarities. Elizabeth Bathory, Hungarian countess, untouchable aristocrat, used her position to lure young victims. Blood was her obsession, whether for beauty or sadistic pleasure. Carmilla Mircalla de Karnstein, Countess of Styria, untouchable aristocrat, used her position to infiltrate noble families. Blood was her essence, literally her means of survival. Both were elite women who operated in the shadows of respectability. Both exclusively targeted young women. Both associated blood with eternal youth. One literal, one metaphorical, and both were eventually hunted and destroyed. Le Fanu never directly cited Elizabeth Bathory, but he didn't need to. In the 19th century, the legend of the Bloody Countess already circulated widely in popular tales, folklore books, and sensationalist stories. A Gothic writer like Le Fanu, obsessed with ruins, aristocratic decay, and psychological terror, certainly knew the legend, and certainly saw in it the perfect archetype for his vampire. The predatory noble woman. The woman who uses beauty and power to destroy blood as currency between life and death. Elizabeth Bathory wasn't just a murderer. She was the mold of the modern female vampire. But there's another layer to this story. Because Le Fanu didn't set Carmilla in Hungary, he placed her in Styria. And that wasn't by chance. Styria, a mountainous region in the heart of the Habsburg Empire, present-day Austria, was the stage for something extraordinary in the 18th century. The Great Vampire Epidemic. Let's go back in time. In 1725, in the remote villages of Serbia, then under Habsburg control, disturbing reports began to emerge. Residents swore their dead relatives were returning at night to attack the living. The most famous case was that of Petar Blagojevich. He died suddenly. Days later, people in the village began dying mysteriously. Witnesses swore they saw him wandering at night. The body was exhumed. It was fresh, with no apparent decomposition. There was blood in his mouth. For the villagers, the conclusion was obvious. Vampire. They staked him through the heart. Official reports were sent to the authorities. In 1732, the case of Herbeontok Arnold Paul exploded. Another supposed vampire, another exhumed body, another post-mortem execution. But this time, military surgeons were sent to investigate. They documented everything in clinical detail. The report was published in newspapers throughout Europe, and panic spread like wildfire. Suddenly, entire villages in the Habsburg Empire, including Styria, began exhuming bodies, looking for signs of vampirism. Any corpse that seemed too well preserved was considered suspect. Hearts were pierced. Heads were decapitated. It was mass hysteria. The chaos reached the ears of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. She was an enlightened, pragmatic ruler, and she wasn't going to tolerate her empire being consumed by medieval superstition. In 1755, she sent her personal physician, Gerard von Swieten, to investigate. Von Swieten traveled through the affected regions, examined bodies, studied the reports, and reached a scientific conclusion. Vampires don't exist. The signs that villagers interpreted as vampirism bloated bodies, blood in the mouth, preserved skin, were simply sannsarf, natural decomposition. Accumulated gases, bodily fluids, nothing supernatural. In 1768, Maria Theresa issued an imperial decree. The exhumation of bodies and desecration of graves was prohibited throughout the Habsburg Empire. The vampire hunt was officially over. But folklore? That doesn't die so easily. Now connect the dots. Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu publishes Carmilla in 1872, exactly 1 century after Maria Theresa's decree. He deliberately sets his story in Styria in Karnstein Castle, in a region that, in the European popular imagination, was synonymous with vampiric terror. The educated public of the time knew this. They knew that Styria had been the epicenter of the epidemic, that bodies had been exhumed, that the Empress herself had to intervene. By choosing this setting, Le Fanu wasn't just creating Gothic atmosphere. He was invoking historical memory. He was saying, this really happened here 100 years ago. And then he added Elizabeth Bathory to the cauldron, the Blood Countess, the predatory aristocrat, the woman who killed hundreds for the promise of eternal youth. Fused with the vampiric folklore of Styria, the result? Carmilla, the vampire who isn't just a folkloric monster, but a reincarnated historical figure. The noble woman who uses power and charm to destroy the creature who feeds on young blood. The predator who operates in the shadows of respectable society. Le Fanu didn't copy Elizabeth Bathory. He transformed her. Carmilla isn't just a vampire story. It's a story about how historical terror transforms into fiction. Elizabeth Bathory existed. Her crimes were real, or at least the legend about them was so powerful it became cultural truth. The vampire epidemic of Styria happened. Bodies were exhumed. Terrified villagers drove stakes through corpses. An entire empire had to be calmed by decree. Le Fanu took these elements, the archetype of the bloodthirsty noblewoman, the setting of folkloric terror, and fused them into a new mythology. Carmilla isn't Elizabeth Bathory, but she carries her DNA. And 25 years later, when Bram Stoker published Dracula, he drank from the same source. The aristocratic vampire, the predator who disguises himself in charm, blood as a symbol of power. But Carmilla came first, and behind her, in the shadows of fiction, stands the silhouette of a real woman, a countess who more than 400 years ago proved that the most terrifying monsters don't need to be supernatural. The question was, who inspired Carmilla? The answer is, an entire epidemic. Elizabeth Bathory gave her the archetype, Styria gave her the setting, vampiric folklore gave her the form, and Le Fanu, he gave her immortality. Today, when we think of seductive female vampires, of elegant predators, of creatures that challenge the boundaries between desire and death, we are thinking of Carmilla. And we are, unknowingly, looking at the distorted reflection of a flesh and blood countess. A woman whose name became synonymous with terror, a figure that history tried to bury, but literature resurrected. Because true vampirism isn't in the supernatural, it's in memory. And memory never dies.